So let's start this out with a story. Back in high school, my first 2 years of high school, I met a friend of mine by the name of Tim. Tim was a giant nerd like me, and he was a big comic book collector. And after getting to know him, I thought, hey, I want to collect comic books. And as years went by, I had a massive collection. However, in about my 20s, I had a girl I was dating person I was dating at the time, we'll say that. And I had half of my comic book collection because my mom kept the other half, and she had decided that I should sell it. And stupid me agreed. And I sold it for a measly $100. However, I found my other half of the collection. So, without further ado, let's look into it. So, however, we're not going to look. I think there's like 2, maybe 3 boxes of comic books in this room of mine. We're going to look at one today because this has a little bit more than it is. So, sitting here, as you can see here, I'll kind of hand over. Sitting here is one box out of, I'd say, 3 of some of my comics that I've had over the years. This one's specifically special because it has a couple of my signed comics that are framed that I had hanging up in rooms over the years. So, without further ado, we're going to start out with what's that right on top. Of course, an old Legend of Zelda NES cartridge. And you're wondering, well, why do I have that? Because in here is a yellow, kind of dirtied, I gotta clean it up, maybe it'll be another video, of one of my original Nintendo systems. Not to be confused with the wood grain one. But the real reason it's here is because in here I also have the second Legend of Zelda game. And let's go through some of the games I have here. Of course, one of my personal favorites, an old baseball game, an old Tetris game, and of course the NES port of the arcade game of Burger Time. But we're not here for that. That could be another video to see my game collection, which is pretty good, if I could ever find it. What's in here, what is mainly in here, is what this video is about. Because we're going over looking at some of my signed comic books. Such as the one, this is signed, by the way. And if you see it right there? It's signed right there by the artist. This is the comic that broke Batman. Well, broke Batman's back. Okay? Oh, I don't know if you can see it's in gold right there. That is this is a signed Catwoman comic. This isn't signed, but this is a sealed white Superman. And I'll get to why this is a special one, because I also have another one of these that's framed. I think we're about to get to them. Yes. So, date on this. So back in '93, DC Comics wanted to do something a little bit unorthodox, I would say, at the time. When comic books were still a thing and still collectible. I mean, now you can find them at like places like Ollie's for cheap, brand new and like multi-packs. But back here, I'm looking. We're supposed to be getting a dumpster today too. To help clean out some of this mess. We're going to be doing a lot of work in here. So I figured I better get a good vlog in before that all happens. DC Comics decided to kill off Superman and then resurrect him. Which brings me to the next stack of comics we're going to be going through, which is the death of Superman. Okay, I'll show you the number of comics it took to kill him. This stack. So you got that one. It's not in order. I had these in order hanging up on the wall because there's a specific order to these. Or this one. And this one. Amazing how I still know my comic knowledge. And this one. And then this one. Which eventually, if they're in order, which they're not, so we'll put them, move this over here. Here. There. Led to this one, which is the actual death of Superman. I don't know where my framed white one is. We might get to it in here, but then, before they resurrected him, they created a series of knockoff Superman, if you will. Not knockoff comic books, but knockoff characters. You had the Iron Superman, which was an iron worker who built a protective super suit out of iron during a building collapse. The genetic Superman, young Superman, made by Lex Luthor. Whole bunch of other, I think there's like 3 of them that came out. Can't remember what the third one was. If you know what the third one was, put it in the comics. Then after they did those, this came out. The Resurrection of Superman. The white one. Unopened, mind you. Ooh, this is another good signed one. This is a signed X-Men. Of course, you can tell. Right there is the signature. Oop, another one that is part of the death of Superman. Because it wasn't just Superman comics. It was across the whole DC universe of comics. So you had Justice League and Superman and all that other stuff. It was basically all the comic characters that interacted with Superman over the years that were friends with them that fought against Doomsday. And, you know, this is one of them. What else we got here? Ooh. John Constantine Hellblazer. This is a good. It's not a signed one, but this is an example of what was called a graphic novel. It was basically a thicker than a comic book, but basically drawn in a comic. And I loved a lot of these dark DC Vertigo ones. This is going to be a good one. I have a feeling. This one. Oh yeah. This, of course, is signed with a certificate of authenticity right there, and it's signed. And then you've got another one. It's called The Breaking of the Bat, and I think this is the one where Batman comes back. The Sword of Azrael. Now we're just getting to some of the random comics. If you've noticed, a lot of these are in protective cases, and that's the reason why. Here's another graphic novel, or this is more of a collection of them, of Superman. What else we got? I haven't seen these in years. Oh yeah. Another good comic book publisher back in the day was another one by the name of Valiant Comics. So they created a series called Exo Man of War. So of course I have a whole series of these. Looks like the dumpster is here. There's Batman Shadow of the Bat. Another good DC comic that came out back in the day. Let's flip them over like this.
Is she barking yet?
The dumpster is here. Another Hellblazer comic.
Well, make sure they put it in the right spot.
Looks like they are. And you got, of course, yeah, never mind the dogs barking. Like I said, we had a dumpster. We have a dumpster coming to help us with the clean out. So then, of course, DC then decided to deal with movie tie-ins with Dark Horse comics. So you got Specimen Aliens. Here's another X-Man comic.
Put it in the right spot.
Yep.
A lot of these. Okay. Ooh, what's
Lucy,
another,
shut up.
another good one?
What?
This is Harbinger. A really good comic.
We should have a video on those.
I am doing one right now.
Oh.
And then we got. I love these foil ones that came out. If you notice, it's kind of the hologram on the top for this Amazing Spider-Man 30th anniversary issue. Let's see what else we got. Something in here. Ooh. I not only did collect comics, I collect comic cards. So here's a couple signed comic cards. I mean, you can't really tell who can get in their clothes. But both of these are signed, and I got the certificate of authenticity as well. How I got these is kind of interesting. Back in the 90s, there's a channel called, I think it's still around, called the Home Shopping Network. And every so often, they would actually have an artist, a comic book artist on there, basically selling signed comics. And my mom would call me in, and we would watch it and ask if I wanted that. And if I wanted that, she'd pick up the phone, dial, and pull out her card and buy the comics for me. Otherwise, if they're not signed, I always had a catalog that I got every week that I would just mark off what comics I wanted, go to my local comic shop that I always went to called Collector's Edge, turn in the catalog, and then when those issues came in, they would have a box set aside just for me, and those boxes, they would put the comics into those boxes, and all I had to do was come in, pick them up, and pay for them, and be on my way. Let's see. Grab another stack. What do we got here? Then we got Continuity Comics was kind of another offshoot one. There were a lot of different comic book artists and companies back in like the 80s and 90s. So you had, of course, Continuity came out with a series called Hybrids. So, one of the biggest, I'm surprised Marvel even did this one of the biggest shows back in the 90s, if you remember, MTV had a show called Beavis and Butthead. Did you know they made a comic book about it? And did you know Marvel took it on? Here you go. Beavis and Butthead, the comic book. And once in a while, comic book artists would take like some of their sketches that they just kind of make into comics and get into a separate thing, which gives us Paul Davis's Skull Farmer. Like this, you can see the title, Skull Farmer. It's nothing more than sketchbook excerpts from some of his sketches that he never made into comics. It's just, kind of like doodles and weird stuff. It's kind of neat. Shadow of the Bat. There's another continuity comic. This is Megalith. I have a lot of these. Here's an old Wolverine comic. Couple Uncanny X-Men. I made it a point back in that time to actually try to collect the entire series from start to finish. So, with one of these boxes, it's probably one of those series where it started with issue 1 and went on to when I stopped collecting them. Alright. Almost done here. Then we've got a couple more. I got, of course, Detective Comics, which is what DC actually stood for. They had a series called Nightfall that featured Batman. It's another graphic novel, if you will. They did a lot of movie tie-in books at the time, too, so you have Batman versus Predator. That is, of course, ones that put the comic books in the future at the time. So you have, of course, X-Men 2099 AD. Yeah. To go through my entire collection would take us forever. And then in another box in the bedroom is a box of that has a couple issues of what's called Wizard, which is kind of like a magazine about comic books that came out at the time. So yeah. Of course. How about a tie beanie baby? This is Bushy the Lion. I don't know why it's in here, but it is. Not going to go through the rest. You get the gist of this. Oh. Okay. So that is it. I mean, I was kind of glad that some of my signed ones were in this box. Because that way at least you got to see some of the signed ones. You also got to see the comics that killed off Superman and the one that resurrected him. A little bit of my past and history, which is kind of partly what this channel I wanted to be about, will be sent to me. You know what? So that'll do it for this part of my comic collection. Of course, I have box number 2 sitting right here. However, if I get enough people that want to see let's do it this way. I will put a poll on the community page, and if I get enough responses to that poll, I will do box number 2. If also I get in the comic books enough comments wanting to see what's in box number 2, which is more of my comic book collection and some other stuff that I can show off, I will do that instead. I will do that. Otherwise, I may do it, I may not do it. I'm not sure. Till then, peace out, stay frosty, and I'll see you tomorrow. See you in the next one.